What is up, guys? Frosty 0232 here for a very special occasion. This video marks episode 50 of Frosty Features, and today we have our big, old, new character, Nova, coming to the game, heading up our Nowhere team, our second character coming to the game with battlefield effects. It's gonna be super sweet. So for those of you who don't know what Frosty Features is, this is a comic book background on the toons that you use in Marvel Strike Force, and I am your humble comic book nerd storyteller helping you through the haze. So without ado, let's get started. Click on it. Click on the right thing. According to Scopely, Richard Rider was an ordinary teenager until he was chosen by the last surviving member of the Nova Corps to become the next Nova. As the host of the Nova Force, a vast energy source, Nova possesses superhuman strength, durability, and enormous quantities of energy. With his newfound powers and responsibilities, Rider fought with heroes like the Guardians against numerous threats to protect the universe, including the likes of Thanos and Annihilus. Yep. So, first look at that. If you don't know who Nova is, yes, he's pretty much Green Lantern. His powers aren't the same, but his story is pretty much green. It's almost exactly the same as Green Lantern. Hate to tell you, always hate to bring up DC in a Marvel video, but Nova is kind of a Green Lantern ripoff, but he's all the cooler for it. This is Richard Rider, Nova. Name, Richard Rider. Yes, absolutely. Many versions of his name have been passed around the MSF community, and here is what I will be referring to him as is Richard. First appearance, the man called Nova number 1, 1976-1970s. Came forth in the comic book world with lots and lots of space exploration, and Nova, like I said, is a very similar, it is a Marvel Green Lantern, more or less, without the minus power ring plus Nova Force, but anyway, yes, very much a big character, pushing through the 70s, coming back in the 90s really heavily with New Warriors, and then kind of having a resurgence, but this is one of the, as far as Marvel Strike Force is concerned, in my opinion, this is one of the biggest comic book characters, most influential comic book characters that is not in Marvel Strike Force. Or in the MCU. Yes. As of I'm sitting here not watching, I haven't seen Guardians of the Galaxy 3. You never know. As of May 7th, 2023, he could, there's always a chance, right? There's always a chance, I don't know. Anyway, so powers/abilities, he's superhuman. So superhuman meaning that all of his traits, speed, reflexes, strength, etc., all are past the ability of a typical human. He has the Nova Force in the Xandarian world mind. So the Xandarian, so we'll talk about the Nova Force. The Nova Force essentially is an energy source that is shared by the Nova Corps. So the Nova Corps is essentially this police situation that polices different sectors of galaxies. This sounds familiar. They police different sections of galaxies, and they're based off of Xandar, which those of you who watch the MCU, Xandar is brought up in Guardians of the Galaxy 1 quite a bit, and a few other times, and it's destroyed in Infinity War off screen. But anyway, so the Nova Force, one of the big things about it is it sends, it's a massive energy, kind of like, I'm just gonna keep making parallels to Green Lantern. The Nova Corps feed off this kind of centralized energy. The less Nova Corps they are, the more energy each individual can get. Right? So we'll talk about that a little bit more in its background. And then the Xandarian world mind. The world mind is extremely important. So it is think of Avatar: The Last Airbender. Essentially all of the Nova Corps and Xandarian people, as they die, as they learn and things like that, all of that information is collected in the world mind. So when Nova Corps people die, their consciousness gets uploaded into the world mind, etc. Not all Nova members are included in, or excuse me, have the ability to access the world mind. It's sort of it's a very, very high, think Jarvis on steroids, right? It's a very high-end upgrade for somebody in Nova's situation. Aliases, Quasar and Buckethead. I know him very well as Buckethead. I actually was originally introduced to Nova from Guardians of the Galaxy, which is super cool. And then there is a situation, there's a short time period where, as with most heroes that have been around since the 70s, powers get stripped. You're a regular person. Oh, something else happens. I get another thing. He does a short stint. He gets the quantum bands from Quasar, and he becomes Quasar for a short period of time. And then Buckethead is what I'm most used to hearing him called outside of his various names that we're sharing in chat. Affiliations. He has a lot of affiliations, but most notably we have the Nova Corps. Obviously, he's sort of this like main rep of the Nova Corps, and unless the Nova Corps is all alive. So we'll talk about that in a second. The Defenders, yes, he ends up in the Defenders and different variations of the Defenders. New Warriors, most notably. Like I said, Richard Rider kind of disappears for a long time in comics and comes back in the 90s with the New Warriors. And then the Guardians of the Galaxy, one of my favorite characters in the Guardians comics is Nova. Who died? Roman Day and Xandar. So what happened? So what had happened was the entire Nova Corps gets wiped out, and Roman Day sends out, sends out his helmet, and it has all of the Nova Corps powers. And then Richard Rider, it kind of chooses Richard Rider very much like the Green Lantern rings. And so what happens is he gets all of the Nova Force. So when I said it earlier, when there's less Nova Force, like less Nova Corpsmen, the fewer get more powered up. So in Nova's situation, and this happens a lot, it's not just one time, but the entire Nova Corps gets wiped out. Therefore, that all of that energy goes to whatever Nova Corps is left. So when Nova gets his powers, he's getting the full Nova Corps, or excuse me, the full Nova Force, which is extremely powerful, and it makes him kind of unstable. And eventually he gets the world mind, which helps him kind of level his emotions. So he has this whole thing where he has his emotions and stuff leveled, and his molecular structure. He's all this to say, he's so powerful that he has to have his helmet and the world mind to keep him from literally being tore apart by his power, which is really cool. His weakness actually comes down to his sanity and his molecular structure, which is really cool to me. Roman Day is in the MCU. It is John C. Reilly's character from Guardians of the Galaxy. So Nova, Richard Rider, is not in the MCU, as I said earlier, but Roman Day is. So this in the comic books is who gives Richard Rider his power. Background: he is born and raised in Hempstead, New York. Something that, oh wait, no, sorry, that's coming up. That's coming up. So he's born and raised in Hempstead, New York, and he gets yoinked out, and he ends up becoming I almost said Guardian. the Guardian of the Terran sector of space. So Earth's kind of general area. Earth 10011. So Earth 10011 for you comic book fans out there is known as the Cancerverse. So this is very important with Nova's story, the Cancerverse. So Nova dies for a long time. So we have a very, it's very well known. There's multiple versions of Nova. Nova Richard Rider is the most popular. Number 2 being Sam Alexander. Sam Alexander kind of comes into being because of Richard Rider's absence, and he it's a whole thing. We're not talking about Sam Alexander, we're talking about Richard Rider. Richard Rider ends up in the Cancerverse for a long time. So I want to talk about the Cancerverse just a little bit. So what this is another version. So typically, Frosty Futures, we stick to Earth 616. This is main continuity, main canon storyline of the Marvel Universe. Earth 10011, the Cancerverse, is a mirror of Marvel 616 up until a point. So it supposedly, as far as, the comics have shown, it's exactly the same in Marvel 616 until Captain Marvel dies. So Captain Marvel, I talked earlier about the 1970s and their big push for space. Captain Marvel was the biggest property of that. This is who Captain Marvel gets her power from, etc. So Captain Marvel dies of cancer eventually in the comics. This is where 10011 and 616 divide. In the situation when Captain Marvel dies in this alternate reality, everyone is so sad, and it's such a big deal, and everybody, produces a lot of energy, and this energy is noticed by these Eldritch gods. Eldritch gods called the Many-Angled Ones. They've got a lot of different names. Shumagorath is a very famous one. But so ultimately, these Eldritch gods feel this situation, and so they focus in on this dimension, and so they start trying to corrupt people to be able to like break through this like barrier from the like metaphysical to physical world. And so they start corrupting people, and eventually they've corrupted enough people that the people summon death. They sacrifice the avatar of death, opening the world, and then the Cancerverse becomes essentially this giant eldritch being thing. And since they kill death, you can't die. So they kind of live in this big world, and there's a lot of zealots, and then the Avengers become Revengers, and then the X-Men become the X-Men. So they're still the X-Men, but it's spelled different. But they're all like evil and stuff, and they like to kill anything that comes in there, but you can't die. So essentially you get killed by things in an Eldritch being, the Revengers, some other stuff, and then you're automatically respawned somewhere else. So it's sort of like an eternal, like, you die, come back, you die, come back, you die, come back, and it's very painful. And Richard Rider spends a very long time in there. So we're going to talk about that more moving forward, but that's just the base of what the Cancerverse is. So because it will be brought up a couple of times. Number 2, Peter Parker parallels. A very big thing with Richard Rider Nova that I love a lot, right? So everybody likes Spider-Man. Spider-Man's extremely popular because he's very relatable. There is one thing that not everybody can relate to, not everybody being most people can't relate to with Peter Parker, and it is that he is, he's relatable because he's the teenager, he gets picked on, he can't afford his rent, but he's a super genius. Richard Rider is exactly the same as Peter Parker, except he's just some guy. He does not have super intelligence. There's really nothing special about him. Earlier in the comics, he's quippy just like Peter Parker. They made him to be an everyman like Peter Parker, but without the super intelligence. In every way, Richard Rider is just this average dude. Which I really like that, and it's funny to me that he isn't more popular than Peter Parker, and I think it has to do with some of the adventures and the spacefaring versus being on Earth, because Peter Parker's fighting at a city level, which is a little bit more relatable than Nova going off to different planets and such. But yes, Nova is another everyman like Peter Parker, but he's actually, for most people, more relatable. So there's a whole thing where he gets pulled off of Earth before he finishes high school. So when he comes back as a full-blown adult, he actually never finished high school, and he has a lot of trouble like getting a job. So when he gets picked to be brought into the New Warriors, actually, it's a big deal, because when you see Richard Rider when they're like making the New Warriors, he's I can't remember exactly what it is, but he's essentially working at like a fast food restaurant, whatever. Like, he's just some guy, which I don't know. I really like vibe with that. So that's just cool to me. So I wanted to point it out. So Peter Parker parallels, they're pretty much the same person. All right, relationships. Charles and Gloria Rider, parents. Robbie Rider is his brother and is very rarely brought up ever. Namely, something very important to keep, which everyone's going to make jokes about this in chat. My dude, Richard Rider, has a very long list of lovers. Most notably, from my point of view, are Namorita, which is Namor's cousin, and Gamora from the Guardians of the Galaxy. They are all ex-lovers. But if you look through Richard Rider's history, my dude's got quite a little black book. Do with that what you will, chat. All right. So that is those relationships. Notable events. Here we go. Number 1, Annihilation. So Annihilation, we have coming to the game for the Nohar Heist team, Annihilation Star-Lord. I will talk about that Star-Lord very little right now, in anticipation for future Frosty features of Star-Lord, which will be cool. But anyway, so Annihilation. Annihilation is one of the biggest, it's one of the giant comic book movements in Marvel canon. It's very similar. If you've got Age of Apocalypse up here, Annihilation's probably like in here somewhere as far as popularity goes. So Annihilation, essentially, most of Nova's stories kind of work like this. Nova's being a hero. all of the Nova Corps is destroyed. Nova is devastated, and then Nova slowly tries to rebuild the Nova Corps while also taking care of whatever destroyed the Nova Corps, right? So in this situation, we have this thing called the Annihilation Wave. So the Annihilation Wave is an armada of these like aliens and their giant spaceships and stuff, and they're coming through and they're destroying stuff. And it's led by this dude named Annihilus. And Annihilus is super cool. He's a bug. He's a bug monster time, but he's the best bug monster. But he's a bug, and his biggest fear is death. And so his move is to destroy anything that could possibly destroy him. And they're from the negative zone, so they have to kind of break through a bunch of stuff to get to these like physical realms and stuff. But his goal is to destroy anything that could possibly end his life. So Annihilus, very, kind of ironically, he's so afraid of death that he's going to kill everything. So everything, everywhere, at any time, he wants it all dead, right? So he makes this Annihilation Wave, and legitimately what they do is they go through the galaxies and they just destroy everything. And what Annihilus does is he likes to capture different powered people and use them essentially as batteries for his machines and such. So what happens with the Annihilation situation is he finds out that if he gets somebody that has cosmic power, think of like Silver Surfer, any Heroes of Galactus, Terrax, things like that, they work as a much better battery than anybody else. So he captures this guy named Ravenous, who's a Marvel character who uses the cosmic power, and this gives him the ability to kind of create this Annihilation Wave. And so they start going through and they start just annihilating a bunch of different galaxies, planets, stuff like that, all while capturing more people with cosmic power. And also this turns their attention to Galactus, of course, because all of Galactus's heralds use cosmic power. He bestows cosmic power. So now their goal is to get Galactus. And once this sort of hits Thanos' ears, Thanos is like, well, screw Galactus. I don't like him. I'm going to help them out. And so, which ends up being a really poor kind of decision on that end. So they go in their pursuit of Galactus. Eventually Xandar is destroyed, and then all of a sudden Nova, he gets the full Nova Force, which is as powerful as Nova gets, and he gets the World Mind. So he becomes extremely overpowered, and he's freaking out because everything has died. And then he ends up getting help from Quasar, and they are like, okay, well, we need to dive bomb in on this Annihilus situation. They're killing so much stuff. What are we gonna do? And then essentially they go to attack the Annihilation Wave, Annihilus, and they go to fight. And right before Annihilus finally captures Galactus and gets all of the power that he needs to wipe out. The whole thing with the Galactus is using that as a battery to wipe out existence, right? So he gets Galactus, they're about to do it, and then freaking Drax with the freaking daggers, Drax the Destroyer comes up, and he is able to stop them. And what happens is Drax frees Galactus. So this is the heroes working with Galactus, which is another reason why Annihilation is freaking crazy. But he frees Galactus, and with that, Galactus turns around and he was like, I don't quite like your armada. And so he destroys the Annihilation Wave, and then Nova puts people in a bubble, and he's like, I'm gonna 1v1 Annihilus, watch me do it. And Phyla Vel's kind of in there, and Phyla's like, yeah, you shouldn't do that, he's too strong, because he's got this thing, it's called a cosmic rod, which extends his life or whatever. And Nova starts getting the crap beat out of him, and then Phyla Vel wiggles out of this little bubble, and she goes and steals it. And then all of a sudden he's weaker, and then Nova's like, now you're screwed. And then Nova 1v1's Annihilus. He takes his fist, shoves it down Annihilus's throat, grabs his guts, and rips it out from the inside. Notably, echoing through the comic book pages, screams, "For the Nova Corps!" And he wins. And then he has to rebuild Xandar again. But it's really cool. Some really notable characters in the Annihilation Wave that kind of come into play. Once again, this is bold strokes. I don't want to, you don't gotta be here for hours. But Super Skrull is helping. Super Skrull, they have this thing called the United Front. It's Super Skrull, Phyla-Vell, Gamora, Star-Lord, and Ronan the Accuser, and more. It's a huge event. All the cool cosmic people, the Guardians of the Galaxy, obviously, are kind of within it. It is super cool. If you have to read a run of comic books, Annihilation is not a bad one to read. Boom skis. So, Return to the Cancerverse. I call it Return to the Cancerverse because I very lightly touched on the fact that he gets stuck in the Cancerverse. So, up next, Return to the Cancerverse. So, the way Richard Rider dies, Nova dies, is that Thanos summons Death at one point to take out this situation. It's this whole thing. He goes to the Cancerverse, summons Death or whatever, and then Star-Lord. I'm not trying to get too deep into that situation because I'm talking about the next situation. Star-Lord and Nova end up having to do this sacrifice play to make sure that because Thanos summoned Death to do something helpful, that it doesn't turn around and he used Death to wipe out, half the universe or whatever he wants to do because he's freaking crazy. So him and Star-Lord, he's got the Cosmic Cube, which is how he does it. And so Star-Lord and Nova are like, yeah, you're not going to do this, bro. And so they start fighting him in the Cancerverse. Once again, if you die in the Cancerverse, you respawn somewhere else in the Cancerverse. So you essentially if you're in a fight in the Cancerverse, it very easily turns into this never-ending duel, right? So they go to the Cancerverse and they're saving the Guardians from the Undying Lord. That's why he summons Death, because there's no death in the Cancerverse, etc., etc. All that to say, all of it works out. It is Star-Lord and Nova versus Thanos, and they're fighting, and then Drax, the Destroyer, shows up. Drax, in the comics, his main focus, as far as his original origins go, is his entire purpose in life is to kill Thanos. So he shows up, and they fight, everybody leaves, and they're all stuck in the Cancerverse, and so what it becomes is a fight over the Cosmic Cube, so that Thanos can't summon Death, but also the heroes need the Cosmic Cube so they can summon a portal back to Earth 616. And then Thanos is like, I can summon that portal. And they're like, no, you can't. Get out of here. And they keep fighting. Ultimately, Nova decides to make the sacrifice play. And he's like, hey, I'm going to use all the Nova Force. I'm going to charge this thing. I'm going to open a door to the 616. I have to stay here. He does it. He lets Drax and Star-Lord go back. And then unbeknownst to him, Thanos is able to sneak through the portal too. And then Richard Rider has a depowered Cosmic Cube. He's stuck in the Cancerverse. And he's getting killed by the Cancerverse itself and the Revengers over and over and over and over. And he is presumed dead on Earth. And after a while, his consciousness fully succumbs to the Cancerverse. He becomes part of the environment, and he's dead. So his conscious is uploaded to the world mind. Dead Nova. Okay, now we start the actual story. That's everything building up, and it's super bold strokes, I know. So Return to the Cancerverse. Sam Alexander Nova, he is trying to figure out how to use his helmet, and hears about this great Nova named Richard Rider, and he goes to talk to his conscience, and when he does so, he wakes up Richard Rider's physical body in the Cancerverse. So that makes him realize, he's alive, whatever. And so when he wakes up in New York, and with his and he's talking to his mother, and he's just back, right? So those two, but the world mind isn't with him, and Sam Alexander doesn't have the world mind, so it's just them two sharing Nova Force, and there's other Nova Corps members at this time too, but they decide they meet up, Richard kind of trains Sam Alexander, and it's a whole fun thing, and then they decide that they need to go back to the Cancerverse to retrieve the world mind. And so they go back to the Cancerverse, and they get there, and the world mind's like, yo, what's up, guys? Richard Rider left me here, and I'm pretty mad about that. And so they're like, no, but you should come back with us. And the world mind he's like, well, I've seen a lot of death. Constantly, in fact, everybody dies, and over here, even though it's horrific, nobody dies, and I don't have to witness that anymore. So I just don't want to. I don't want to go back. And while that situation with that resistance, the Cancerverse and the world mind are taking control of Richard Rider, and Sam Alexander keeps having to fight him. And he's like, hey, you got to get your wits back about you, whatever. And they keep fighting all while dealing with this, and eventually they get to a point where it's like, World Mind, you're coming or we're leaving. And World Mind's like, no, I'm staying, dude. This place is cool. And it's not, though. It's not, though. But the World Mind's like, I'm staying. Y'all go do your thing. And so then they do this really cool thing where they both, they hold hands. They hold hands and they charge the cosmic cube so they can open a door, and they both get back to Earth 616. And it's cool. It's all good. But anyway, yeah, so that's a cool thing. That's I've got the number 1 over here of that little run right there in the back. It's cool. Return to the Cancerverse. It's just a neat thing. Cool. And that's it. So, Marvel Strike Force doesn't care about power level, but here at Frosty Features, we do. So the way this works, if you are a character with a multiversal power level, you are a threat to reality, not only as we know it, but as everybody else knows it. If you have a universal power level, you can end your reality, maybe hop over to another reality, and end it there. Cosmic means you are a threat on a planetary scale. That means you can level planetary bodies up to solar systems and galaxies if you use enough of your power. Nuclear means you have power equal to that of a nuclear bomb. You can level things as small cities and up to a planetary body with enough time and force. Super soldier means that you are at peak human level plus. You are at a situation where people cannot beat it. An actual human being cannot achieve you're lifting tons, things like that. City level means you are a human at peak level. You are fighting typically, ninjas and things. Maybe you're a secret agent. You are trained to the true peak of human levels, and you are a very skilled fighter. Super soldier being you could level a wall. City means you could just take out multiple human opponents. And then there's Greg. Greg's the undead Asgardian that is spawned by Hela in Marvel Strike Force, and he is an undead Asgardian with Asgardian physiology that is rotten. So for the sake of argument, maybe not true, but for the sake of argument, we're going to say Greg is equal to that of an equal human level. So if I have flashlight nunchucks and a lot of determination, I could theoretically beat Greg, right? So, in the case of Richard Rider, we have an extremely powerful being whose power does range whether or not the Nova Core is there, but even when he's just a regular corpsman, he is a very powerful individual. And in the case of Richard Rider, I rate him at a cosmic level. Here's why. When he's using things like the Nova Core, he can fly. And one of the main things that you see with Nova is when he is flying around the Earth, he has to limit his power, his speed, because he can move so fast that it will dissolve the Earth, right? So he is legitimately the best epitome of what a cosmic level being is because he has to restrain himself just to not destroy the planet he's on when he's at full power. So, yes, Richard Rider at Cosmic, and according to Scopely, it is extremely limited. You know very little about Richard Rider from this situation. It really doesn't even explain how his powers work, so they really didn't even try. They posted just a really quick couple of sentences about the beginning of his thing. Don't really go into any detail whatsoever. Yeah, so that's what it is. So that is Frosty Features Richard Rider, Frosty Features Nova. I hope you all enjoyed it. Please let me know your favorite Nova moments in the comments, or if I missed anything that you feel like I should have got, or if I just got something wrong. I totally love to hear it. I'm not perfect. Please like, comment, and subscribe. It doesn't cost you anything but a couple of clicks, and it helps the channel out so much. Also, as a reminder, I stream at Twitch at the link above every Sunday morning at 8 a.m. Central Standard Time, where we do Frosty Features live. So thank you all very much for watching this. I hope that you all have a fantastic week. And most importantly, y'all, stay cool.